Hi, so my name's Samuel Smith, and I'm a part of Team 3 in the Asian market. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the interpretive sim and how our Team 3 did and kind of what we learned from it. So let's just go ahead and hop right into it. So we decided to enter the Japan market first. We decided to do this because we thought we could learn from this market. That'll probably be a little bit easier to learn from rather than hopping into a big market such as China or India. But our goal was to eventually enter India, but hopefully at this point we had kind of learned from some mistakes and really hadn't hurt ourselves too much. So when we decided to enter Japan, we decided to enter the market channels of hypermarket, drugstore, and independent. And we did this by looking at the competition section that was given to us by Interpretive or by the simulation. And we saw that these areas did really well in Japan. So we decided to enter those markets. We also decided to go with a lot of SKUs after looking at what the consumers liked, and we at least had a small and medium sized toothpaste in every area, so economy, white, healthy, and kids. We also had one that was in one large, and that was for healthy. So up to this point, our decisions were pretty good. We did good with the many SKUs. Um, but we also made our biggest mistake right after this. So we began looking at advertising and promotion, and we kind of miscalculated on the advertising part. And part of that we think was us looking or being early in the simulation, not understanding what we were looking at when we were reading how the competition did their things. But we spent way too much on advertising and not enough on salespeople. So that first period, we sold 55.6 million units, but we came out with a negative 48.5 million contribution, and 76% of our expenses was due to advertising. So when we entered period two, we decided to change our strategy up. Obviously, we weren't going to keep advertising that high, but we learned very quickly that this wasn't aggressive enough. We didn't really change our SKUs up any, and we were fine with where we really felt like we were salespeople wise. Um, so we didn't really change that either. Our unit sales did increase by nearly 100 million, and part of that had to do with the just how the economy was doing in Japan and had a good year during period two, and we had earned 11.3% of the market. However, we did lose 34 million in this period, and 30% was from advertising again, and we had immediately dug ourselves into a negative $82 million contribution hole. I think what we learned from these first two periods is we should have talked to the other groups sooner, kind of learned and listened to what they were doing, and maybe we could have realized that we were looking at the advertising all wrong, and that we needed to have more salespeople. And some of that was just on our problem on our end, not understanding how the simulation worked yet. But we had to kind of come up with a new strategy. Were we going to be super aggressive, or were we going to kind of sit back and hope we didn't lose more money and just try to fix what we had already done? But we went with an aggressive strategy. Then when we're going to try to make up for what we had lost, knowing that we had 5 more periods to get this fixed. So we nearly, we completely cut all of our advertising campaigns to pretty much where it was almost nothing, and we increased our salespeople significantly, and we also decided to increase our SKU prices. That was for period three. Also in that period, we entered the China market, doing mostly medium and large SKUs for economy, white, healthy, and kids. Our advertising was extremely low as well in China, and we added a lot of salespeople. And we also decided to build a plant in China. We knew we'd lose money that period because of the plant, no matter what the outcome was. But we figured we might as well go and do it again. We were going aggressive, and we wanted this to help us lower our cost of goods sold in both China and in Japan. Yeah, so we built the plant, and I think the markets we entered were hypermarket and drugstore. As again, we saw this in the retail sales portion of the competition. So we did 171 million units in China on our first period in China. And in Japan, we had done 150 million units, which wasn't a huge increase, but we weren't losing money in Japan anymore, which was great. We did lose money in China. It was our first year, um, but we had gained a positive contribution um, in Japan, and we didn't. Our overall contribution hadn't changed much because they kind of evened each other out. So in period four, we again went aggressive and we increased our SKU prices in both Japan and China. And we actually dropped an SKU in Japan. We dropped the only large toothpaste that we had. Um, and we also continued to increase all of our salespeople, moving them up in every channel, and moving up the number of people we had in every channel while keeping a very low advertising budget. It was this period that we began to see a lot of positives. We had our plant built, our cost of goods sold had gone down, and we started to see how we could really make money and started to really get a hold of what this sim was. And so we finally had felt we had learned from our mistakes in the Asian markets and that we could learn a lot going forward.
Hi, my name is Jordan Shipman, and I'm going to continue with period 5 for project number 3 in the Asian market. In period 5, we decided to enter India and also drop in Japan. In period 5, our sales in China grew drastically as our contribution margin went from about a negative 100 to a positive 564, and we were very pleased with this. In our SKUs that period, we had a lot of sales in the kids market, especially in the independent channel. Going into period 6, it was our first period in India, and we felt like we did pretty well that period. We didn't have as many sales as we had hoped, but we knew that that would grow as we became better aware of that market. We actually did put a lot of money into advertising in period 6 in India. We put $600 million into advertising that period. And we did this because even though advertising is what messed us up in the past, we felt that India was a different market and advertising would actually work in that market. And we were right in that. Advertising, along with a strong sales force in the independent drugstore and hypermarket, but especially in independent, definitely did help us in India. In period 6, when you look at China, our period contribution did drop a little bit, but that does have to do with the economy in China. But it did not affect us as much as it could have, so we are thankful for that. Going into period 7, our contribution went back up in China to 633 million with 406 million unit sales. And in India, our unit sales increased to 89 million, and our period contribution went from negative 750 to a positive 550. And we know that in the next few years this would continue to increase, and we plan to be in the positives by the end of period 8. One thing that did mess us up in this simulation was we built a plant in China, and when we were in China and Japan, that did help us with cost. But as we moved to India, it was actually cheaper to import our units from the home plant instead of from the China plant. And so we put a lot of money into a plant that was just being used in China. And unfortunately, that did not help us much in the Indian market. Also in the Indian market, we put too much money into our sales force and had too many SKUs in period 6 and 7. As the next few years, if we had more time in the simulation, we would drop some of our SKUs to drop some of our costs, and also drop some of the cost of our distributors in India, as advertising actually does more good than our distributors do in India, to help keep that contribution growth going in India. One mistake that we did make going into India in period 6 was in period 6, the economic outlook for India dropped drastically from a positive, almost a positive 4% growth to a negative 13% growth in period 6 in India. And that was also our first year in India. We believe that if this economic growth did not happen, or economic decline did not happen, we would have started out very well in India, and we would have been able to grow a lot faster. Thankfully, the India GDP is going right back up, and by period 7, it was already at a negative 3% from the negative 14%. So, and we will see that continue to grow in the next few periods. So we are very excited to see how that helps our company. And that is the end of our board report.